My wife wore a smile like armor, always a bad sign. Tess stood in our kitchen doorway, phone clutched in her manicured fingers, that particular expression plastered across her face, the one that meant she was about to lie to me with the enthusiasm of a politician promising lower taxes. "Cal, honey," she chirped, her voice hitting that artificially sweet note that made my teeth ache. "I'm meeting an old friend tonight. You remember Jessica from college, right?" I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing server logs for the tech company that employed me as operations manager. 20 years in military logistics before this gig had taught me to notice details, like how Tess never mentioned Jessica anymore, or how her phone had been buzzing with notifications she quickly dismissed, or how she'd started wearing perfume to run errands. "Jessica," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "The one who moved to Portland 3 years ago?" "That's right." Tess's smile never wavered, but I caught the tiny muscle twitch near her left eye. "Tell number one." "Interesting. When did she get back in town?" "Oh, just for the weekend. She's staying downtown." Tess moved toward the hallway, already mentally checked out of this conversation. "Don't wait up." I nodded and returned to my screen, but my mind was racing. 22 years of marriage, and Tess thought I was stupid enough to buy this garbage. The woman who used to tell me everything, every office drama, every neighborhood gossip, every random thought that crossed her mind, had become a stranger who spoke in carefully constructed half-truths. After she left, perfume trailing behind her like evidence, I sat in the sudden quiet of our suburban house. Rain drummed against the windows, typical for October in our corner of Washington state. The sound used to be comforting. Now it felt like nature's way of washing away whatever was left of my marriage. I opened my laptop and navigated to our shared phone plan. One of the perks of being the tech-savvy spouse, Tess had never bothered learning how to manage our digital accounts. Her recent calls told an interesting story. 3 calls to a number I didn't recognize, all within the past week. The longest lasted 47 minutes. A reverse lookup revealed the number belonged to Porter Keller. I knew that name. Real estate agent, worked out at the same gym as Tess, drove one of those oversized trucks that screamed compensation issues. Divorced last year, according to neighborhood gossip. The kind of guy who wore cologne to the grocery store and called everyone buddy. My phone buzzed. Text from Tess. "Jessica says hi. Having such a great time catching up." I stared at the message for a long moment, then opened our banking app. Dinner at Romano's Italian, $87. Yesterday. I'd been working late, grabbed takeout from the Thai place near my office. Tess said she'd eaten leftovers. Another charge caught my attention. Nordstrom, $215, last Tuesday. When I'd asked about the shopping bag in her car, she'd claimed it was a return. The picture was forming like a Polaroid, developing in slow motion. My wife of 22 years was having an affair with a real estate agent who probably considered hair gel a major food group. I could have confronted her right then, could have called and demanded the truth, could have driven downtown to whatever hotel bar she was probably sitting in, sharing appetizers and lies with Porter. But that would be emotional, messy, unpredictable. I'd spent 2 decades in military logistics. Planning was my specialty. And Tess was about to learn that her husband wasn't the pushover she apparently thought he was. I opened a new browser window and began making a list. First, I needed more evidence. Concrete, undeniable proof that would leave no room for gaslighting or manipulation. Tess was smart, but she'd grown careless, comfortable in her deception. Second, I needed to understand the scope of this betrayal. How long had it been going on? How serious was it? Who else knew? Third, I needed to plan my response. Not revenge. That implied emotion, passion, the kind of messy confrontation that left everyone wounded and nothing resolved. No, this called for something more surgical, more permanent. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo message from Tess. 2 wine glasses on a candle-lit table, with the caption, "Girls' Night. Jessica is so funny, you'd love her stories. I zoomed in on the photo. The wine glasses were at Romano's. I recognized the distinctive stemware from the dozen anniversary dinners we'd shared there over the years. But more interesting was the reflection in the window behind the table. A man's silhouette checking his phone. I screenshotted the image and enhanced it using photo editing software I'd learned for work presentations. The reflection became clearer. Broad shoulders, receding hairline, the distinctive outline of Porter's oversized watch that he wore like a badge of honor. "Thanks for the evidence, honey," I murmured to my empty kitchen. Over the next hour, I methodically worked through our shared accounts. Email, social media, cloud storage. Tess had never been security conscious, using variations of the same password for everything. Our anniversary date, followed by her birth year. Sentimental and predictable. Her email revealed a treasure trove of deception. Flirty messages with Porter going back 3 months. Restaurant reservations I knew nothing about. A hotel booking for next weekend while I was supposed to be at a work conference in Portland. But the real revelation was in her text messages, automatically backed up to our shared iCloud account. Tess and Porter's conversation from this afternoon made my stomach clench with a mixture of anger and disgust. Porter: "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wore that cologne you like." Tess: "Cal's working late as usual. Sometimes I think he loves those computers more than me." Porter: "His loss is my gain. You deserve someone who appreciates you." Tess: "You always know what to say. See you at 7. I sat back in my chair, processing the casual cruelty of it. 22 years of marriage reduced to a punchline about my work schedule. The woman I'd supported through graduate school, career changes, her mother's illness, and a dozen other life challenges now painted me as an inattentive husband to justify her infidelity. The rain had intensified, turning our quiet street into a watercolor blur of streetlights and shadows. I found myself thinking about our early years together, when Tess would wait up for me no matter how late I worked, when we'd talk until dawn about everything and nothing. When had that changed? When had I become the obstacle to her happiness instead of her partner in building it? My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Sid Morrison's name appeared on the screen. My best friend since high school, now running a successful auto detailing business across town. "Cal, you sound like someone stole your lunch money," Sid said after I answered. "What's going on?" Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I considered deflecting, making small talk about work or the weather. But Sid had been my friend for 25 years. He'd been my best man, had helped me move into this house, had listened to me complain about everything from my boss to my lawnmower. "Tess is having an affair," I said simply. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "How do you know?" I gave him the abbreviated version. The lies, the phone records, the text messages. Sid listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of disgust or disbelief. "What are you going to do?" he asked when I finished. "I'm still working on that part." "You could hire a private investigator, get evidence for the divorce proceedings." "Maybe." I stared at my laptop screen, where Tess's messages were still displayed. "Or maybe I handle this myself." "Cal, don't do anything stupid. I know you're angry." "I'm not angry," I interrupted, and realized it was true. The initial shock and hurt had crystallized into something colder, more focused. "I'm disappointed, and I'm planning." After I hung up with Sid, I returned to my research. Porter's social media profiles painted a picture of exactly the kind of man I'd expected. Gym selfies, expensive dinners, photos of his truck at various outdoor locations with captions about living life to the fullest. Recently divorced, as I'd suspected, with an ex-wife named Monica who'd kept her maiden name and scrubbed all photos of Porter from her own social media accounts. Interesting. I found Monica's contact information through a professional networking site. She worked as a marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit. According to her profile, she'd been married to Porter for 6 years before their divorce was finalized 8 months ago. I drafted an email, then deleted it. Too direct, too risky. Instead, I created a throwaway email account and sent a simple message. I think we should talk about Porter. I'm married to one of his current interests. While I waited for a response, I began phase 2 of my investigation. Financial records, credit card statements, phone logs. I built a comprehensive timeline of Tess's deception. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed to understand the end game. Was this a midlife crisis fling, or was Tess planning to leave our marriage? The hotel reservation for next weekend suggested the latter, but I needed confirmation. I found it in a draft email Tess had never sent, buried in her drafts folder. It was addressed to her sister Karen, our nearest family member since both our parents had passed away. Karen, I know this will come as a shock, but I've decided to leave Cal. I've met someone who makes me feel alive again, who sees me as more than just a roommate who shares expenses. I know the timing isn't ideal, but I can't keep pretending to be happy in a marriage that ended years ago. I'll call you soon to explain everything. I read the message 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of betrayal. The casual dismissal of our marriage, the implication that I was somehow responsible for her unhappiness, the complete absence of guilt or regret. My laptop chimed with a new email. Monica had responded. I wondered when someone would reach out about Porter's latest victim. Yes, we should definitely talk. Are you free for coffee tomorrow? I smiled for the first time all evening. The pieces were falling into place. Tess returned home at 11:30, her cheeks flushed from wine and lies. She found me in the living room reading a book I wasn't actually processing. How was Jessica? I asked without looking up. Oh, wonderful. She's doing so well in Portland. New job, new apartment. She seems really happy. That's nice. Did you take any pictures together? A pause. We were too busy talking to think about photos. You know how it is with old friends. I nodded and returned to my book. Tess lingered for a moment, perhaps expecting more questions or conversation, then headed upstairs. I heard the shower running, followed by her usual bedtime routine. When I finally went upstairs an hour later, Tess was asleep, or pretending to be. I lay in the darkness beside her, listening to her breathing, and began finalizing my plan. Tomorrow, I would meet with Monica and gather more intelligence about Porter. I would continue documenting Tess's deception, building an unassailable case. And then, when I had everything I needed, I would act. But not with lawyers or private investigators or messy confrontations. Tess wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that her husband was much better at strategy than she'd ever imagined. Monica Keller turned out to be exactly what I'd hoped for, intelligent, observant, and harboring a deep reservoir of resentment toward her ex-husband. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from our neighborhood where curious eyes might spot us. She was attractive in a sharp-edged way, with auburn hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she didn't suffer fools gladly. The opposite of Porter's usual type, based on his social media preferences. Your wife has excellent taste in restaurants, Monica said after we'd exchanged introductions and ordered coffee. Porter took me to Romano's exactly twice during our marriage. Both times were my birthday. He's been there 4 times in the past month, I replied, consulting the notes I'd compiled. Always on Tuesday or Thursday evenings. His poker nights, Monica said with a bitter laugh. I should have known he was lying about those too. Porter's idea of a poker face is raising his eyebrows and grinning. Over the next hour, Monica painted a detailed picture of my wife's boyfriend. Porter was, according to his ex-wife, a man who viewed relationships as transactions. He'd married Monica for her family's real estate connections, then systematically alienated her friends and family while building his own business. He's charming at first, Monica explained, stirring her latte with unnecessary force. Flowers, expensive dinners, weekend getaways, but it's all calculated. He studies women like market research, figures out what they want to hear, then delivers it with that practiced smile. What ended your marriage? I found out about his affairs. Plural. Porter doesn't do monogamy, he does variety. Your wife is probably the third or fourth woman he's been seeing since our divorce. This was news to me. I'd assumed Tess was Porter's primary focus, but apparently she was just the current favorite in a rotation of married women looking for excitement. Do you have proof of the others? Monica smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. Porter's not nearly as clever as he thinks he is. He kept a separate phone for his extracurricular activities, but he used our shared cloud account for photos. I have pictures, messages, hotel receipts, everything. Would you be willing to share that information? With pleasure, but I want something in return. I waited. Porter's been telling people that I'm unstable, that I'm stalking him, that our divorce was my fault. I want his reputation destroyed as thoroughly as he tried to destroy mine. That can be arranged. We exchanged contact information and agreed to meet again in 2 days. Monica would compile her evidence about Porter's other affairs, and I would continue documenting his relationship with Tess. When I returned home, Tess was in the kitchen, preparing what she called her famous chicken salad for a neighborhood potluck that evening. She seemed unusually cheerful, humming while she worked. "How was your day?" she asked without turning around. "Productive. Yours?" "Oh, the usual. Meetings, emails, more meetings. Sometimes I wonder why I chose marketing as a career." I watched her work, noting the new bracelet on her wrist, silver with small diamonds. I'd never seen it before, and it wasn't the kind of jewelry Tess typically bought for herself. "That's a nice bracelet," I commented. Her hand froze for a microsecond before resuming its chopping motion. "This old thing, I've had it forever." Lie number 2 for the day. I'd already spotted the Nordstrom charge that corresponded to the bracelet's likely cost, but I wanted to see how easily deception came to her now. The neighborhood potluck was held at the Hendersons' house 3 blocks away. These gatherings happened monthly, rotating between different families, and usually involved too much wine and too many opinions about local politics. I found myself studying the other couples with new eyes, wondering how many harbored secrets like ours. The Washingtons, married 30 years, who still held hands while walking. The Youngs, newlyweds, who couldn't keep their hands off each other. The Patels, who bickered constantly, but with obvious affection. Had Tess and I ever looked that comfortable together? When had we stopped being partners and become roommates who shared a mortgage? "Cal, you're being awfully quiet tonight," observed Janet Henderson, our hostess. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking about work," I replied, the same excuse I'd been using for years to avoid social interaction. Tess, across the room, was holding court with a group of wives, animated and laughing. She looked genuinely happy for the first time in months. The realization stung more than I'd expected. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. "Is this Cal? It's Monica. Check your email when you get a chance. I found something interesting." I excused myself and stepped onto the Hendersons' back patio, opening my email app. Monica had sent a folder of screenshots and photos. Porter's phone records showed calls to 6 different women over the past 4 months. Tess was just one name on a list. But the real revelation was in the photos. Porter had apparently been documenting his conquests, taking pictures of gifts he'd given, restaurants he'd visited, even hotel room keys. It was like a trophy collection, and Tess featured prominently in the recent editions. There was the bracelet she was wearing tonight, a photo of their table at Romano's from last week, a hotel key card from the Marriott downtown, dated 3 days ago when Tess had claimed to be working late. The final photo made my hands clench involuntarily. It was Tess, asleep in what was obviously a hotel bed, taken without her knowledge. Porter had been documenting their affair like a hunting expedition. I forwarded the images to my own secure email account, then returned to the party. Tess was still laughing with her friends, oblivious to the fact that her boyfriend was treating her like a conquest to be catalogued and shared. The drive home was quiet. Tess seemed lost in thought, staring out the passenger window at the dark suburban streets. "That was fun," she said finally. "I love how close our neighborhood is. Everyone's so supportive of each other." "Supportive," I repeated. "That's one way to put it." "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Just thinking about how well people really know each other." Tess glanced at me, perhaps hearing something in my tone, but didn't pursue it. When we got home, she immediately went upstairs claiming exhaustion. I stayed in the kitchen, planning my next move. Over the following days, I established a routine. Work during the day, investigation during the evening, careful documentation of every lie, every suspicious charge, every unexplained absence. Tess's pattern became predictable. Tuesday and Thursday evenings were her yoga classes that were actually dinners with Porter. Saturday afternoons were shopping with friends that involved hotel visits. Sunday mornings, while I was at the gym, were for phone calls that she thought I couldn't hear from the basement. I began leaving subtle traps, mentioning plans that I hadn't actually made to see if Tess would suddenly develop conflicting commitments. Asking about friends I knew were out of town to test her alibi construction skills. Each time, she failed spectacularly. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening when Tess claimed to have food poisoning and couldn't attend my company's annual dinner. I'd been looking forward to the event. It was a rare chance for us to dress up and act like the couple we used to be. "I'm so sorry, honey," she said, curled up on the couch with theatrical misery. "I've been sick all day. You go ahead. I'll just rest here." I attended the dinner alone, making excuses for Tess's absence to colleagues who asked, but I left early, claiming concern for my wife's health. When I arrived home at 9:30, the house was empty. I checked the Find My Phone app we'd set up years ago for emergencies. Tess's location showed the Marriott downtown, the same hotel from Porter's photo collection. I sat in my car outside our house, engine running, and made a decision. Not the emotional, confrontational choice that would lead to shouting and tears and lawyers, something more fitting for the level of deception I'd uncovered. I drove to the Marriott and parked across the street. Through the lobby windows, I could see the bar area where couples sat at intimate tables, sharing drinks and secrets. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to see Tess with Porter to know what was happening. But I took photos of her car in the parking garage, time-stamped and geotagged. Then I drove home and began implementing my plan. First, I changed all the passwords on our shared accounts: banking, utilities, streaming services, everything. Tess had never bothered to learn these details, always relying on me to handle our digital life. Second, I transferred funds from our joint accounts to a new account in my name only. Not everything. I wasn't trying to steal from her, but enough to ensure she couldn't drain our savings to fund her new relationship. Third, I began preparing what I thought of as the evidence package: screenshots, photos, financial records, hotel receipts, a comprehensive documentation of Tess's affair, organized chronologically and cross-referenced with her lies to me. When Tess returned home at 11:45, I was in bed, pretending to sleep. She slipped in quietly, obviously trying not to wake me. The smell of cologne, Porter's cologne, clung to her clothes. "How are you feeling?" I asked softly. "Much better," she whispered. "I think it was just a 24-hour thing. Sorry I missed your dinner." "That's okay. I understand." And I did understand. I understood that my wife had chosen to prioritize her affair over our marriage. I understood that she felt comfortable lying to my face while smelling like another man. I understood that whatever we'd once had together was over, and had been for longer than I'd wanted to admit. What Tess didn't understand was that her husband wasn't the passive, work-obsessed man she'd apparently decided I was. She was about to learn that 20 years of military logistics training had taught me patience, planning, and how to execute a mission with precision. The next morning, I kissed her goodbye like always, wished her a good day at work, and drove to my office with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. It was time for Phase 2. I met Monica for the second time at a small diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee and the waitresses called everyone on. She arrived with a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. "Porter's been busy," she said, sliding the folder across the worn Formica table. "6 women in the past 4 months, including your wife. He's got a type. Married, professional, looking for excitement their husbands apparently aren't providing." I opened the folder and immediately regretted it. Porter had documented his affairs with the enthusiasm of a nature photographer. Pictures of gifts, intimate dinners, hotel rooms, and worse, photos of the women themselves, often taken without their knowledge. He kept all this. "Porter's ego requires documentation," Monica explained, stirring sugar into her coffee with sharp, angry motions. "He likes to revisit his conquests. I found the files when I was packing up his office after our divorce." One photo caught my attention. Tess laughing at something off camera, wearing the blue dress she'd claimed to have worn to a work function last month. But the background showed Romano's distinctive wallpaper, and the timestamp indicated a Tuesday evening when I'd been working late. "How long have you known about Tess specifically?" "About 3 weeks. I saw them together at the mall, holding hands like teenagers. She seemed completely smitten with him." I continued flipping through the evidence, my anger transforming into something colder and more focused. Porter wasn't just cheating on these women, he was collecting them, documenting them like trophies. "What's your plan?" Monica asked. "I'm still working on the details, but I want Porter's reputation destroyed, professionally and personally. I want everyone in his social circle to know exactly what kind of man he is." "And your wife?" "Tess made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences." Monica smiled, and I saw why Porter had married her. She was beautiful when she wasn't angry, with intelligent eyes and a sharp wit. But her ex-husband had turned that intelligence into a weapon. "I like you, Cal. You're nothing like Porter described." "What did he say about me?" "That you were a boring computer guy who ignored his wife. That Tess was lonely and underappreciated." Monica's expression darkened. "Porter specializes in identifying vulnerable women and telling them exactly what they want to hear." We spent the next hour planning. Monica would provide evidence of Porter's other affairs, while I would document his relationship with Tess. Together, we would expose him in a way that would destroy his business and his social standing. "There's something else," Monica said as we prepared to leave. "Porter's been telling people he's going to marry Tess once she divorces you. He's already picked out a ring." The news hit me like a physical blow. Tess wasn't just having an affair, she was planning to leave our marriage for a man who was simultaneously cheating on her with multiple other women. I drove home in a daze, processing this new information. 22 years of marriage, and Tess was ready to throw it away for a man she'd known for 3 months. A man who was documenting their relationship like a hunting expedition. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Not physically changed, but emotionally hollow, like a movie set designed to look like a home, but lacking any real warmth. How long had it been this way? How long had we been going through the motions of marriage while the actual connections slowly withered? Tess was in the kitchen, preparing dinner with unusual enthusiasm. She'd made my favorite meal, pot roast with vegetables, the recipe she'd learned from my mother years ago. "Special occasion?" I asked, hanging my jacket in the closet. "Can't a wife cook a nice dinner for her husband without a special reason?" The word wife sounded strange coming from her, like she was trying on a costume that no longer fit properly. We ate in relative silence, making small talk about work and weather and neighborhood gossip. Tess seemed nervous, checking her phone frequently and avoiding direct eye contact. "Everything okay?" I asked finally. "Of course, why wouldn't it be?" "You seem distracted." "Just tired. Work's been stressful lately." Another lie. I'd checked her work calendar through our shared family account. Tess had left the office early 3 times this week and had blocked out tomorrow afternoon for what she'd labeled a client meeting that didn't appear on any of her official schedules. After dinner, Tess excused herself for a bath, claiming she needed to relax. I cleaned the kitchen and listened to her moving around upstairs, running water and talking quietly on the phone. When she came downstairs an hour later, she was wearing the silk pajamas I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. They still had the tags on them. "I thought we could watch a movie together," she said, settling beside me on the couch with calculated casualness. "Like we used to." We scrolled through streaming options, neither of us really paying attention to the choices. Tess kept glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Guilt, perhaps, or determination. "Cal," she said during a particularly boring romantic comedy, "are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "With us, with our marriage, with your life." I studied her face, looking for clues about where this conversation was heading. "That's a complicated question. It doesn't have to be. Are you happy?" "Are you?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the television screen without seeing it. "I think we've grown apart," she said finally. "We're like roommates who share expenses." The phrase was identical to one she'd used in her unsent email to her sister. Tess had been rehearsing this conversation, probably with Porter's coaching. "What are you suggesting?" "Maybe we should talk about what we both want, whether this is still working for either of us." I muted the television and turned to face her fully. "Tess, if you want to leave our marriage, just say so. Don't dress it up as a mutual decision." Her carefully composed expression cracked slightly. "I didn't say I wanted to leave. You didn't say you wanted to stay either." We stared at each other across the sudden gulf that had opened between us. 22 years of shared history, and it had come down to this, a conversation where we both knew the truth, but neither was willing to speak it directly. "I think I should sleep in the guest room tonight," Tess said finally. "Give us both some space to think." I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. After she went upstairs, I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by the artifacts of our life together. Wedding photos, vacation souvenirs, books we'd read and discussed, furniture we'd chosen together. All of it suddenly felt like evidence of something that had already ended, even if we hadn't officially acknowledged it yet. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey gorgeous, can't wait for tomorrow. Wear the red dress. You know how crazy it drives me. P." Porter had sent the message to the wrong number. Instead of Tess's phone, he'd accidentally texted me. I stared at the message for several minutes, then forwarded it to Monica with a note. More evidence for the file. Then I began planning the final phase of my response to this situation. Tess wanted out of our marriage? Fine. But she was going to learn exactly what kind of man she was leaving me for, and Porter was going to discover that some husbands weren't as passive as he assumed. I spent the next 2 hours researching Porter's business, his social media presence, his professional associations. Real estate was a relationship-based industry that depended heavily on reputation and referrals. A scandal could destroy years of careful networking. Porter's weakness was his ego. He couldn't resist bragging about his conquests, documenting his affairs, showing off his lifestyle on social media. That same ego would be his downfall. By the time I went to bed, alone in the master bedroom that suddenly felt too large, I had the outline of a plan that would give both Tess and Porter exactly what they deserved. The next morning, Tess was already gone when I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Went to work early. We should talk more tonight." But there wouldn't be a tonight. Not the way she was imagining. I called in sick to work, then drove to Porter's real estate office. I didn't go inside. I just wanted to see his operation, understand his professional environment. The office was in an upscale strip mall, with Porter's photo prominently displayed in the window along with his sales achievements. According to his website, Porter specialized in luxury homes and had built his reputation on personal service and attention to detail. His client testimonials painted him as trustworthy, professional, family-oriented. His clients had no idea they were working with a man who collected married women like baseball cards. I spent the afternoon implementing the first phase of my plan. Using the evidence Monica had provided, I created a comprehensive dossier on Porter's affairs. Not just the facts, but the timeline, the patterns, the way he systematically targeted vulnerable women. Then I began identifying his professional contacts, his clients, his social circle. Real estate agents depended on referrals and reputation. Once that reputation was damaged, the business would follow. When Tess came home that evening, she found me in the kitchen, cooking dinner with unusual care. I'd prepared her favorite meal, salmon with asparagus, the dish we'd shared on our first date 23 years ago. "This smells amazing," she said, seeming genuinely surprised. "What's the occasion?" "I've been thinking about what you said last night," I replied, not looking up from the stove. "About whether we're happy, whether this is still working. And I think you're right. We have grown apart. We want different things." Tess sat down at the kitchen island, studying my face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you want to leave our marriage, I won't fight you. But I want you to be honest about why." "Cal, I know about Porter." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that had been smoldering for months. Tess's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, denial, guilt, and finally something that might have been relief. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." "Are you going to make this difficult?" The question revealed everything about how Tess viewed our marriage, our shared history, our future. I was an obstacle to be managed, not a partner to be respected. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not going to make it difficult, but I want you to understand what you're choosing." "What do you mean?" I turned off the stove and faced her fully. "Porter isn't the man you think he is, Tess. He's not going to rescue you from your boring marriage and give you the exciting life you think you deserve. You don't know anything about Porter. I know he's been cheating on you since the beginning. I know he's documented your entire relationship like a trophy collection. I know he's told his friends that you're just another lonely housewife looking for attention." Tess's face had gone pale, but her expression remained defiant. "You're lying." "I have photos, Tess, messages, hotel receipts. Porter keeps records of all his conquests, and you're just the latest addition to his collection." For a moment, I thought she might break down, might realize what she was throwing away. Instead, she stood up and grabbed her purse from the counter. "I don't have to listen to this," she said. "Porter loves me. He's going to marry me." "He's going to marry you while he's sleeping with 5 other women? That's an interesting definition of love." But Tess was already heading for the door. "I'm staying at my sister's tonight. We can talk about this when you're ready to be rational." After she left, I sat alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the smell of the dinner I'd cooked for a conversation that had ended exactly as I'd expected. My phone buzzed with a text from Monica. "How did it go?" "Phase 1 complete," I replied. "Time for Phase 2. "What's Phase 2? I looked around our empty house, at the photos of our wedding day, at the life we'd built together that Tess was now ready to abandon for a man who saw her as a conquest. "Porter's about to learn that some husbands fight back." The neighborhood block party had been planned for months, but the timing couldn't have been more perfect. Every family on our street would be there, along with friends, co-workers, and extended social networks. It was exactly the kind of public forum I needed for what came next. I spent the morning setting up tables and chairs in the Hendersons' backyard, stringing lights between the trees, arranging the sound system that would later serve a purpose Janet Henderson couldn't have imagined when she asked me to handle the technical details. "Cal, you're a lifesaver," Janet said, watching me test the microphone and projection screen I'd volunteered to provide for the evening's slideshow of neighborhood photos. "I never would have figured out all this equipment." "Happy to help," I replied, making sure the wireless connection was working properly. I love bringing the community together. Tess hadn't come home the night before, and her text messages had been brief and cold. She was staying with her sister Karen until we could discuss things like adults. She planned to attend the block party, she informed me, because she wasn't going to let our marital problems affect her friendships. Perfect. Monica arrived at 3 o'clock, carrying a laptop bag and wearing the kind of smile that suggested she was looking forward to the evening's entertainment. "Is everything ready?" she asked, accepting the beer I offered her. "The technical setup is complete. How's our guest of honor?" "Porter's been bragging to his gym buddies about his new girlfriend. Apparently, he's planning to make some kind of announcement tonight about their relationship." I raised my eyebrows. "He's going to announce his affair with a married woman at a neighborhood party?" "Porter's not known for his subtlety. He thinks everyone will be impressed by his conquest of the lonely housewife." The guests began arriving at 5 o'clock. Families with children, elderly couples, young professionals, the usual mix of suburban social life. I played the role of helpful host, making sure everyone had drinks, directing them to the food tables, making small talk about work and weather and local politics. Tess arrived at 6:30 with Porter in tow. She'd introduced him as a friend from the gym to the neighbors who hadn't met him, but their body language told a different story. Porter kept his hand on the small of her back, leaned in close when she spoke, displayed the kind of possessive behavior that marked territory. "Cal," Tess said when she spotted me near the bar setup, "I'd like you to meet Porter. Porter, this is my husband." Porter extended his hand with the kind of aggressive friendliness that barely concealed his satisfaction at the situation. He was exactly what I'd expected: tall, gym-built, wearing cologne that could be detected from across the yard. "Great to meet you, Cal," he said, gripping my hand harder than necessary. "Tess has told me so much about you." "I'm sure she has," I replied, matching his grip strength with interest earned from 20 years of military fitness routines. "She's mentioned you too." Porter's smile faltered slightly at my tone, but he recovered quickly. "Beautiful neighborhood you have here. Very quiet." "It can be," I agreed, "but sometimes the quiet ones are the most interesting." We stared at each other for a moment, two men who understood exactly what was happening, but were maintaining the pretense of civility for the crowd around us. "Well," Tess said, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, "we should mingle, lots of people to catch up with." As they walked away, I noticed how Porter's hand had moved from Tess's back to her waist, how he nodded at other men with the smug confidence of someone who believed he'd won a competition they didn't know they were playing. Sid arrived at 7 o'clock, carrying the additional equipment I'd requested. We'd been friends long enough that he could read my mood without explanation. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly, helping me connect his laptop to the projection system. "Porter's planning to announce their relationship tonight. He wants to make it public. I'm happy to help with that." "And Tess?" I looked across the yard where my wife was laughing at something Porter had whispered in her ear. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months, glowing with the excitement of forbidden romance and new possibilities. Tess made her choice. Now everyone gets to see what she chose. At 8 o'clock, Janet Henderson called for attention and announced the evening's slideshow, a collection of neighborhood photos from the past year, set to music and projected on the large screen I'd set up between two oak trees. The presentation began innocently enough. Photos from previous block parties, holiday decorations, children playing in yards, families posing in front of their homes. The crowd gathered in front of the screen, drinks in hand, pointing out familiar faces and laughing at candid moments. "This is wonderful, Cal," called out Mrs. Patterson from across the yard. You've really outdone yourself with the technical setup. I smiled and nodded, my finger hovering over the laptop's trackpad. Monica stood beside me, her own laptop ready with the backup files in case anything went wrong with the primary presentation. 15 minutes into the slideshow, just as the crowd had relaxed into comfortable viewing, I made the switch. The neighborhood photos disappeared, replaced by a new image that caused audible gasps from the audience. It was Porter and Tess at Romano's restaurant, holding hands across a candlelit table, clearly intimate and romantic. "What the?" Porter started to say, but the next photo appeared before he could finish. This one showed them entering the Marriott Hotel, Porter's hand on Tess's lower back, both of them laughing at some private joke. The timestamp indicated a Tuesday evening 3 weeks ago. "Cal, what are you doing?" Tess's voice cut across the suddenly quiet crowd. "Sharing some photos," I replied calmly. "Isn't that what tonight is about? Bringing the community together?" The next image was one of Porter's own photos, Tess asleep in a hotel bed, taken without her knowledge. The crowd's murmur grew louder, a mix of shock and uncomfortable fascination. "Turn it off," Porter demanded, starting toward the projection equipment. But Sid stepped into his path, arms crossed, making it clear that wouldn't be happening. "I think people are enjoying the show," Sid said mildly. "Look how engaged everyone is." The slideshow continued with methodical precision, hotel receipts showing multiple visits over the past 3 months, text messages between Porter and Tess, displayed in large font for easy reading, restaurant bills from romantic dinners that had occurred while I was working late or out of town. "Oh my God," whispered someone in the crowd. "Is that Tess Torvin?" "And Porter Keller," added another voice. "Isn't he married?" "Divorced," Monica called out helpfully. "Very recently divorced, and very busy since then." The presentation shifted to Porter's other relationships, photos of him with different women at the same restaurants, the same hotels, sometimes within days of each other. The crowd began to understand they weren't just witnessing an affair, they were seeing a pattern of behavior. "This is harassment," Porter shouted, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You can't do this." "Actually, I can," I replied. "These are public places, public records, and information shared willingly on social media. Nothing here is private or privileged." Tess had gone completely pale, standing frozen as her neighbors and friends processed what they were seeing. The woman they'd known as a devoted wife and community member had been living a double life for months. The final section of the presentation was Monica's contribution, a comprehensive timeline of Porter's affairs since his divorce, complete with photos, messages, and financial records. 6 different women, overlapping relationships, identical patterns of manipulation and deception. "Porter likes to collect married women," Monica announced to the crowd. "He targets wives who feel neglected, tells them exactly what they want to hear, then moves on to the next conquest. Tess is just his latest trophy." The slideshow ended with a single text slide. "Questions?" The silence that followed was broken by someone's nervous laughter, then a burst of conversation as the crowd processed what they'd witnessed. Some people began gathering their belongings, clearly uncomfortable with the public destruction they'd just observed. Others moved closer, drawn by the drama and eager for more details. "You're insane," Tess said, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. "You've ruined everything." "I've revealed everything," I corrected. "There's a difference." Porter grabbed Tess's arm, trying to pull her toward the exit, but she shook him off. The fairy tale romance had just been exposed as a calculated seduction, and she was processing the implications in real time. "Is it true?" she asked Porter, her voice barely audible above the crowd noise. "About the other women?" Porter's expression cycled through denial, anger, and finally resignation. "Tess, we can talk about this privately. Answer the question. Are you sleeping with other women?" The crowd had gone quiet again, waiting for his response. Porter looked around at the faces watching him, realized there was no graceful exit from this situation. "It's complicated," he said finally. "It's not complicated," Monica called out. "It's simple. Porter's a serial cheater who targets married women. You're just the current favorite." Tess turned to look at me, her face a mixture of hurt and fury. "Why did you do this?" "Because you asked me to be honest about what I wanted," I replied. "I want everyone to know the truth about the man you're leaving me for. I want your friends and neighbors to understand what kind of person you've become. And I want Porter's reputation destroyed as thoroughly as he's destroyed our marriage. You could have just let me go. You could have just been honest with me instead of lying for 3 months." The crowd was beginning to disperse, people gathering their belongings and heading for their cars with the uncomfortable energy that followed public disasters. But many lingered, clearly fascinated by the real-life drama unfolding in front of them. "This isn't over," Porter said, pointing at me with shaking finger. "You'll hear from my lawyer." "Looking forward to it," I replied. "I have lots more evidence we didn't have time to share tonight." Porter stalked toward the exit, but Tess didn't follow. She stood in the middle of the yard, surrounded by the wreckage of her secret relationship and her public reputation, looking lost and confused. "Tess," called Janet Henderson, approaching with obvious reluctance. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Tess replied automatically, though she clearly wasn't. "I just need to... I should go." She walked toward the parking area without looking back at me, her shoulders rigid with controlled emotion. I watched her leave, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness that surprised me with its intensity. "Well," Sid said quietly, beginning to pack up the projection equipment. "That was thorough." "It needed to be public," I replied. "Private confrontations can be denied, explained away, minimized, but everyone saw this. Everyone knows the truth now." Monica approached with 2 fresh beers and a satisfied expression. "Porter's business is going to be very interesting over the next few weeks. Real estate clients don't like working with people who make the local gossip circuit." As we finished cleaning up, neighbors approached with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Some offered support. Others asked probing questions about how long I'd known, what I planned to do next. A few seemed genuinely shocked that such drama had been unfolding in their quiet suburban neighborhood. "You handled that well," said Tom Patterson, shaking my hand before heading home. "Can't have been easy, but sometimes people need to face consequences for their actions." By 10 o'clock, the yard was empty except for Sid, Monica, and me. We sat at one of the remaining tables, drinking beer and watching the cleanup crew from the catering company pack up the food service. "So, what happens now?" Monica asked. "Now Tess gets to decide if she wants to stay with a man who's been cheating on her since day one," I replied, "and Porter gets to explain to his clients and colleagues why his personal life is suddenly public entertainment. And you?" I looked around the empty yard, at the lights strung between trees that had witnessed the end of my marriage, at the projection screen that had displayed the evidence of my wife's betrayal to our entire social circle. "Now I get to start over," I said. "Without the lies, without the deception, without pretending that everything is fine when it's not." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're going to regret this." I showed the message to Sid and Monica. "Porter?" Sid asked. "Probably. He's not handling public humiliation as well as I'd hoped." "You think he'll try something?" I considered the question, thinking about Porter's personality, his ego, his obvious anger at being exposed. "Maybe, but Porter's a coward who picks on vulnerable women. He's not going to risk a direct confrontation with someone who's prepared for it." But as we finished packing up the equipment and headed to our cars, I found myself checking the shadows, scanning the street for Porter's distinctive truck. The evening had gone exactly as planned, but I had a feeling the consequences were just beginning. Porter's truck was parked across from my house when I returned home at midnight. He sat behind the wheel, engine running, making no attempt to hide his presence. When I pulled into my driveway, he climbed out and walked toward me with the aggressive posture of someone looking for a fight. "We need to talk," he said, stopping just outside what he probably considered striking distance. "Nothing to discuss," I replied, grabbing my equipment bag from the trunk. Everything was covered pretty thoroughly at the party. "You humiliated me in front of the entire neighborhood." I shared publicly available information. If you're humiliated, maybe you should examine your behavior instead of blaming the messenger. Porter stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage for intimidation. "You think you're clever, but you just made a big mistake." I set down my bag and faced him fully. 20 years of military training had taught me to recognize genuine threats versus playground posturing. Porter was angry and embarrassed, but he was also scared. His entire social and professional reputation had just been destroyed in front of an audience. "What kind of mistake?" I asked calmly. "Tess is going to forgive me. Women always do. And when she does, she's going to remember how you humiliated her tonight. You think she'll ever come back to you after this?" "Porter, I don't want her back. That's what you're not understanding. I want her to know exactly what kind of man she's choosing over 22 years of marriage." "She'll choose me," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "What we have is real. What you had was just routine." I almost felt sorry for him. Porter genuinely believed his own manipulation, thought that his practiced charm and calculated romance represented authentic emotion. He'd spent so many years playing roles that he'd forgotten the difference between performance and reality. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, picking up my bag and heading toward the house. "Tomorrow your clients are going to start calling with questions about their real estate agent's personal life. Your colleagues are going to distance themselves from the scandal, and Tess is going to realize that the man she thought was rescuing her from her boring marriage is actually a serial manipulator who's been cheating on her since day one. You don't know anything about our relationship. I know you took photos of her sleeping without her permission. I know you've been bragging to your gym buddies about your conquest. I know you're still seeing at least 3 other women while telling Tess you love her." Porter's face flushed darker. "Those other women don't mean anything. And neither does Tess. That's what she's going to figure out." I reached my front door and turned back to face him. Porter stood in my driveway, hands clenched into fists, looking like a man who wanted to hit something but couldn't figure out what. "Stay away from my house," I told him. "And stay away from me. If you want to continue your relationship with my wife, that's between you and her. But if you come back here looking for trouble, you'll find more than you can handle." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Porter stared at me for another moment, then stalked back to his truck. He peeled out of my driveway with enough force to leave rubber marks on the asphalt, a final gesture of impotent rage. Inside my house, I poured a glass of whiskey and sat in the living room, processing the evening's events. The confrontation with Porter had been inevitable, but I was surprised by how pathetic he'd seemed. The confident, charismatic man who'd seduced my wife was actually an insecure predator who fell apart the moment his behavior was exposed to public scrutiny. My phone rang at 12:30. Tessa's name appeared on the screen. "What do you want?" I answered. "How could you do that to me?" Her voice was thick with tears and rage. "In front of everyone we know? I told you I knew about Porter. I told you what kind of man he was. You chose not to believe me. You could have handled this privately. Like you handled your affair privately? By lying to my face for 3 months while you planned to leave our marriage?" Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Porter explained about those other women. They were just casual things, nothing serious." I closed my eyes, amazed by her willingness to accept obvious lies rather than face the truth about her situation. "Tess, he took photos of you sleeping. He's been bragging about you to his friends. He documented your entire relationship like a hunting trophy. How is any of that love? You're just trying to hurt me because you're angry." I'm trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life, but if you want to stay with a man who's been cheating on you since day one, that's your choice. He's not cheating on me anymore. How do you know? Another pause. Because he told me he wasn't. I laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. The man who's been lying to you for 3 months told you he's not lying anymore and you believe him. At least he makes me feel wanted. At least he pays attention to me. Porter pays attention to 6 different women, Tess. You're just his current favorite. The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, I'm filing for divorce next week. Good. We should have done this months ago. I want half of everything. You can have half of everything we built together, but you can't have half of what I've earned since you started your affair. I've already moved those funds to separate accounts. That's not legal. Actually, it is. Marital assets are protected, but income earned after the marriage has effectively ended can be considered separate property. Check with your lawyer. Another silence. Then, I hate you. No, you don't. You hate that I found out about your affair. You hate that I expose Porter's other relationships. You hate that your friends and neighbors now know what you've been doing. But you don't hate me. You just hate the consequences of your choices. She hung up without another word. I finished my whiskey and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. For the first time since discovering Tess's affair, I felt like I was moving forward instead of just reacting to her deception. The next morning brought a series of interesting phone calls. First was Monica, reporting that Porter's real estate office had been flooded with calls from clients asking about their agent's personal situation. 2 major listings had already been pulled, and his broker was scheduling an emergency meeting to discuss recent developments. Second was Sid, who'd heard from mutual friends that the block party slideshow was already circulating on social media. Someone had recorded portions of it on their phone, and the video was spreading through local Facebook groups and neighborhood apps. "You're famous," Sid said with obvious amusement. "Or infamous, depending on your perspective." "How's the reaction?" "Mixed. Some people think you went too far, others think Porter and Tess got what they deserved, but everyone's talking about it." The third call was from my boss, Ms. Rivera, who'd heard about the situation through her own neighborhood network. "Cal, I'm not going to ask for details about your personal life," she said, "but I want to make sure this situation isn't going to affect your work or create problems for the company." "It won't," I assured her. "The marriage is over, the truth is public, and I'm moving forward." "Good. Take a few personal days if you need them. Sometimes it's better to let these things settle before jumping back into normal routines." I decided to take her advice, spending the day organizing my finances and consulting with a divorce attorney. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Wells, reviewed the evidence I'd compiled and nodded approvingly. "This is very thorough," she said. "Your wife's attorney will have a difficult time arguing for alimony or claiming you're hiding assets. The documentation of her affair provides clear grounds for divorce, and the timeline establishes when the marriage effectively ended." "What about her claim to half our assets?" "Marital property will be divided according to state law, but assets you've accumulated since discovering the affair can be considered separate property. The key is proving when you learned about her infidelity and when you began protecting your financial interests." By late afternoon, I had a clear picture of my legal position and financial future. The divorce would be straightforward, if not pleasant. Tess would get her share of what we'd built together, but she wouldn't be able to drain our accounts to fund her new relationship. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email." The message contained a link to a local gossip blog that had picked up the story of the block party confrontation. The headline read, "Suburban Drama, Cheating Wife and Boyfriend Exposed at Neighborhood Party." The article included photos from the slideshow and quotes from unnamed neighbors describing the evening's events. I was scrolling through the comments when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Tess standing on my front porch, holding a large suitcase and looking exhausted. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Porter and I had a fight," she said without preamble. "I need to get some of my things." "What kind of fight?" He was with someone else last night, after the party. I found out this morning." I stared at her, processing this information. Less than 24 hours after his relationship with Tess had been publicly exposed, Porter had already moved on to his next conquest. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Can I come in? Please?" I stepped aside and let her enter the house that had been our home for 15 years. She looked around with the expression of someone visiting a place they used to know well, but that now felt foreign. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "Which mistake? Having the affair, or believing Porter when he said he loved you?" "Both. All of it." She set down her suitcase and faced me directly. "I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. For the lying, for the cheating, for throwing away what we had." "What we had was already broken, Tess. The affair was just the symptom, not the disease. Maybe we could try counseling, work on whatever went wrong between us." I looked at my wife, soon to be ex-wife, and felt a mixture of sadness and relief. She was beautiful, intelligent, capable of genuine remorse when forced to confront the consequences of her actions. But the trust between us was gone, destroyed not just by her affair, but by months of calculated deception. "It's too late for that," I said gently. "We both know it." She nodded, tears starting to flow. "Can I stay here tonight? Just until I figure out what to do next?" "You can stay in the guest room. But Tess, this doesn't change anything. We're still getting divorced." "I know." As she carried her suitcase upstairs, I wondered if this was how all marriages ended, not with dramatic confrontations or passionate arguments, but with quiet resignation and the recognition that some damage couldn't be repaired. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "This isn't over." I showed the message to Tess when she came back downstairs. "That's Porter," she said, her face pale. "He's been sending me messages like that all day. I think he blames you for ruining his reputation." "His reputation ruined itself. I just provided the documentation." "He's really angry, Cal, and he's been drinking. I'm worried he might do something stupid." I looked out the front window at our quiet suburban street, wondering if Porter was out there somewhere, planning his next move. The man had lost his girlfriend, his reputation, and probably his business in the span of 24 hours. Desperate people made unpredictable choices. "We'll deal with whatever comes next," I told Tess. "But right now, you should get some rest. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to untangle 22 years of shared life." As night fell over our neighborhood, I found myself checking the locks on all the doors and windows, wondering if the consequences of my public revelation were just beginning. The crash of breaking glass woke me at 2:47 a.m. I'd been sleeping lightly, half expecting trouble, so I was instantly alert and moving toward the sound before my conscious mind had fully processed what was happening. The noise had come from downstairs, the kitchen window, based on the direction and the way the sound had echoed through the house. I grabbed the baseball bat I'd placed beside my bed and moved quietly toward the staircase. "Cal?" Tess's voice called softly from the guest room. "What was that?" "Stay where you are," I whispered back. "Lock the door and call 911. I crept down the stairs, avoiding the steps I knew would creak, listening for any sound that would indicate where the intruder might be. The house was dark except for the streetlight filtering through the front windows, casting long shadows across the familiar furniture that now felt like obstacles in a maze. Another sound from the kitchen, footsteps on broken glass, someone moving carefully, but not carefully enough. I reached the bottom of the stairs and peered around the corner into the kitchen. Porter stood near the broken window, holding a crowbar and looking around with the confused expression of someone who'd acted on impulse without thinking through the consequences. He was clearly intoxicated, swaying slightly as he tried to navigate around the kitchen island. "Looking for something?" I asked, stepping into view with the bat held ready. Porter spun around, nearly losing his balance. "You ruined everything," he slurred. "My business, my reputation, my relationship with Tess, everything." "You ruined those things yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it." "She would have stayed with me if you hadn't interfered. We were happy." "She caught you with another woman less than 24 hours after your relationship became public. How exactly is that my fault?" Porter raised the crowbar, but his movements were clumsy and telegraphed. "You think you're so smart, military man with his plans and his evidence, but you don't know everything." "What don't I know?" "Tess was going to leave you anyway. She's been planning it for months. The affair was just extra." I kept the bat ready, but didn't advance. Porter was drunk and angry, but he was also cornered and desperate. Those combinations made people unpredictable. "If she was planning to leave anyway, why are you so upset that I exposed your cheating?" "Because now she knows about the others. Now she thinks I'm just like exactly what you are?" Porter's face contorted with rage, and he swung the crowbar at the kitchen counter, sending dishes and glasses flying. "I loved her. It wasn't supposed to be like this." "You loved the idea of her, the challenge of seducing a married woman, the ego boost of stealing someone else's wife, but you never loved Tess herself. You don't know anything about love. When's the last time you made her laugh? When's the last time you surprised her with anything? You treated her like a roommate." The accusation stung because it contained enough truth to hurt. I had taken Tess for granted, had allowed our marriage to become routine and comfortable instead of passionate and exciting. But that didn't justify her affair or Porter's manipulation. "Maybe I did," I admitted, "but you treated her like a conquest. At least I respected her." "Respected her?" Porter laughed bitterly. "You humiliated her in front of the entire neighborhood. You put her private business on display for everyone to judge. That's your idea of respect?" Before I could answer, we heard sirens in the distance, growing closer. Tess had followed my instructions and called for help. Porter heard them too and realized his situation was about to get much worse. Breaking and entering, destruction of property, threatening behavior while intoxicated. He was looking at serious legal consequences. "This is your fault," he said, pointing the crowbar at me with shaking hands. "All of it." "The only thing that's my fault is not paying enough attention to my wife," I replied. "Everything else, the affairs, the lies, the manipulation, that's all on you." The sirens were getting closer. Porter looked toward the broken window, probably calculating whether he could escape before the police arrived. But he was too drunk and too slow, and we both knew it. "Porter," I said, lowering the bat slightly, "put down the crowbar and walk away. You're drunk, you're angry, and you're about to make the situation much worse for yourself." "It can't get any worse. My business is finished, my reputation is destroyed, and the woman I love thinks I'm a cheater. You are a cheater, and your reputation should be destroyed, but you can still walk away from this without adding assault charges to your problems." For a moment, I thought he might listen to reason. Porter looked at the crowbar in his hands, then at me, then at the broken window he'd used to enter my house. The sirens were very close now, probably turning onto our street. Then he raised the crowbar again and stepped toward me. "If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." I raised the bat to block his swing, but Porter was bigger and his weapon was heavier. The impact sent vibrations up my arms and knocked me back a step. He pressed his advantage, swinging again, this time aiming for my head. I ducked under the swing and came up inside his reach, driving my shoulder into his chest and sending him stumbling backward into the kitchen counter. He hit hard, knocking over more dishes, but kept his grip on the crowbar. "Stop!" Tess's voice came from the kitchen doorway. She was holding her phone, probably still connected to 911, recording everything. "Porter, what are you doing?" "Tess," Porter said, his voice suddenly pleading. "Tell him to back off. We can work this out." "Work what out? You broke into his house. You're threatening him with a weapon." "I just wanted to talk to him, to make him understand what he's done to us." The sound of car doors slamming came from outside, followed by heavy footsteps on the front porch. The police had arrived. "Police, open the door." "It's open," I called back, not taking my eyes off Porter. "Kitchen, one intruder, armed with a crowbar." Porter's shoulders sagged as he realized the situation was hopeless. He looked at Tess one more time, his expression a mixture of love and desperation and anger. "I really did love you," he said quietly. "No," she replied, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. "You love the idea of me. Cal was right about that." Two police officers entered the kitchen with weapons drawn, quickly assessing the scene. They saw Porter with the crowbar, me with the baseball bat, broken glass everywhere, and Tess recording from the doorway. "Drop the weapon," the first officer commanded. "Now!" Porter looked like he might resist for a moment, then let the crowbar fall to the floor with a metallic clang that seemed to echo through the sudden silence. "Hands behind your head. Turn around slowly." As the officers cuffed Porter and read him his rights, I found myself studying his face. The confident, charismatic man who'd seduced my wife was gone, replaced by someone who looked lost and confused and much older than his 38 years. "Sir, are you injured?" the second officer asked me. "No, I'm fine. He broke the window to get in, threatened me with the crowbar, but didn't actually hit me. We'll need statements from both of you, and we'll need photos of the scene for evidence." Over the next hour, we gave our statements, provided contact information, and watched as Porter was loaded into a police car. He didn't look at us as they drove him away, staring straight ahead with the blank expression of someone whose world had just collapsed completely. "Ma'am," one of the officers said to Tess, "do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? Given the relationship between you and the suspect, you might want to consider staying elsewhere until he's processed and released." "She can stay here," I said. "We're getting divorced, but she's not in any danger from me." The officer nodded and handed us both cards with case numbers and contact information. "We'll be in touch about the court proceedings. The suspect will probably be released on bail sometime tomorrow, but there will be conditions. No contact with either of you. No coming within 500 feet of this address." After the police left, Tess and I stood in our damaged kitchen, looking at the broken glass and overturned dishes that represented the final destruction of our shared life. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "This is all my fault. Porter's responsible for his own actions. You didn't tell him to break into our house. But if I hadn't had the affair, none of this would have happened." I considered her words, thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. Maybe not. But something would have happened eventually. We were already broken, Tess. The affair was just the thing that forced us to admit it. She nodded, wiping tears from her face. "What happens now?" "Now we clean up this mess, get the window repaired, and move forward with the divorce. Porter will face whatever consequences the court decides, and we both try to figure out what our lives look like apart from each other." We spent the next hour cleaning up the broken glass and salvaging what we could from the damaged kitchen. It felt oddly appropriate, cleaning up the physical destruction while preparing to dismantle the emotional wreckage of our marriage. As dawn broke over our neighborhood, I found myself thinking about the past week, the discovery of the affair, the public confrontation, the break-in and arrest. It felt like a lifetime had passed since I'd first suspected Tess was lying about her evening plans. "Cal," Tess said as we finished sweeping up the last of the glass, "do you think we could have saved it? Our marriage, I mean, if we'd tried harder, been more honest with each other?" I looked at my wife of 22 years, seeing both the woman I'd fallen in love with and the stranger she'd become. Maybe. But we'll never know now. Do you hate me? No, I said, and realized it was true. I'm angry about the lies, disappointed about the affair, sad about what we're losing. But I don't hate you. I don't hate you either. I know it probably seems like I do, with everything that's happened. But I don't. We stood in our kitchen as the morning light filtered through the undamaged windows, two people who'd shared more than 2 decades of life together, but who could no longer share a future. My phone buzzed with a text from Monica. Saw the news about Porter's arrest. Are you okay? Fine, I replied. It's over. And it was. The affair, the deception, the public confrontation, the desperate attempt at revenge, all of it was finished. Porter would face legal consequences for his actions. Tess and I would proceed with our divorce, and eventually, we'd both move on to whatever came next. I should pack my things, Tess said. Find somewhere more permanent to stay. Take your time. There's no rush. She nodded and headed upstairs, leaving me alone in our damaged kitchen. I looked around at the home we'd shared for 15 years, at the life we'd built together that was now ending, and felt a mixture of sadness and relief that surprised me with its intensity. Outside, our neighborhood was waking up to another ordinary day, unaware that the drama that had captivated them for the past week had finally reached its conclusion. Life would go on, gossip would fade, and eventually, this would all become just another story people told about the time their quiet suburban street was the scene of an affair, a public confrontation, and a desperate man's final attempt to reclaim what he'd lost. But for me, it wasn't just a story. It was the end of one chapter of my life and the beginning of another. And for the first time in months, I was looking forward to finding out what that new chapter might contain. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the space where Porter had stood just hours earlier, defeated and desperate, and finally facing the consequences of his actions. The broken glass was gone, the immediate damage repaired, but the larger changes, in my marriage, in my life, in my understanding of who I was and what I wanted, those would take much longer to fully comprehend. But I had time now. Time to figure out what came next. Time to rebuild. Time to become the person I wanted to be instead of the person I'd settled for being. And that, I realized, was worth all the pain and drama and destruction of the past week. It was worth everything.